Prologue: the most dangerous person is the one who thinks they are always right. Throughout human history, some of the most powerful and destructive forces have come from a simple belief: I am right. A person convinced they are wrong may hesitate. They may question themselves, they may search for answers. But a person convinced they cannot be wrong becomes something far more dangerous. They stop listening, they stop questioning, they stop examining themselves. And when a human being loses the ability to question themselves, even good intentions can become destructive. History is filled with people who believed they were fighting for something greater. They believed they were protecting their people, defending their values, creating a better world. They did not see themselves as villains. They saw themselves as necessary. And this creates one of the deepest questions in human nature. How can people believe they are doing good while causing harm? In ancient Athens, a philosopher named Socrates walked through the streets asking questions. He questioned politicians, he questioned teachers, he questioned people who believed they possessed wisdom. His crime was not violence. His crime was making people uncomfortable. Because Socrates exposed something dangerous. Many people were certain about things they had never truly examined. They had opinions, but they had not searched for understanding. They had beliefs, but they had never questioned where those beliefs came from. Thousands of years later, another thinker would ask an even more uncomfortable question. His name was Friedrich Nietzsche. Nietzsche did not simply ask, "What is good?" He asked, "Why do humans call something good? Where do our values come from? Why do we admire certain behaviors and reject others? Are our beliefs based on truth, or are they shaped by fear, tradition, culture, and hidden desires we rarely admit?" Nietzsche challenged humanity to look beneath the surface, because human beings are not always driven by the reasons they claim. A person may say, "I want justice," but perhaps they also want revenge. A person may say, "I want success," but perhaps they also want recognition. A person may say, "I forgive," but perhaps they are simply avoiding confrontation. The human mind is complicated. We do not only hide things from others. Sometimes we hide things from ourselves. This question became one of the greatest discoveries of modern psychology. Carl Jung studied the hidden parts of human personality, the emotions we reject, the desires we suppress, the qualities we refuse to accept. He called this hidden side the shadow. Every human being carries a shadow. The kind person has moments of selfishness. The confident person has moments of insecurity. The calm person has moments of anger. The generous person may still desire appreciation. Having these qualities does not make someone evil. It makes them human. The danger begins when a person refuses to acknowledge them, because what we refuse to understand can eventually control us. This is why the greatest battle of human life is not simply between good people and bad people. It is between awareness and ignorance, between the person we show the world and the person we truly are. A person who says, "I have no darkness inside me," may never develop the strength to control their darkness. But a person who understands their fears, weaknesses, desires, and impulses gains something powerful: choice. This is the central question of this documentary. Are you truly a good person? Or are you simply someone who has never examined yourself deeply enough to discover the forces shaping your behavior? Because the human being is capable of extraordinary kindness. We build civilizations, we sacrifice for our families, we protect strangers, we create beauty, we show compassion. But the same human being is also capable of cruelty. We deceive, we manipulate, we justify, we destroy. The difference often comes down to one thing: whether we understand ourselves. The philosopher Blaise Pascal once observed that humans are complicated creatures, capable of greatness and weakness at the same time. This contradiction is at the center of human existence. We are not purely good, we are not purely evil. We are beings constantly pulled between different forces, between ego and humility, fear and courage, desire and discipline, comfort and growth. The purpose of this journey is not to prove that morality is meaningless. It is not to convince people that good and evil do not exist. The purpose is much deeper. It is to understand why humans behave the way they do, why people defend beliefs, why people follow crowds, why people hide parts of themselves, why suffering can make one person wiser and another person bitter, why power can transform one person into a leader and another into a tyrant. Because the greatest danger facing humanity is not only evil people, It is unconscious people, people who never question themselves, people who never examine their motives, people who believe their intentions automatically make their actions right. The journey beyond good and evil begins with a simple but difficult act, looking inward. Before judging the world, understand yourself. Before changing others, examine your own character. Before claiming to know what is right, have the courage to ask, why do I believe this? Because the person who knows themselves is harder to manipulate, harder to control, harder to deceive. And perhaps that is where true freedom begins. Not freedom from morality, not freedom from responsibility, but freedom from ignorance of oneself. This is the journey beyond good and evil, the journey into the hidden world of human nature, the world inside every person, the world we spend our entire lives trying to understand. Chapter 1: The good person who never looked inside. Every person wants to believe they are good, but very few people ask the harder question, what makes me believe I am good? Imagine a person admired by everyone around them. They are respected, they help others, they speak about kindness and honesty. Their reputation is built on being a good human being. But one day they face a situation that threatens their identity. Someone challenges them, someone criticizes them, someone refuses to give them the respect they expect. And suddenly, something unexpected appears. The kindness disappears, the patience disappears. The person who seemed humble becomes defensive. The person who spoke about forgiveness becomes filled with anger. The person who claimed to understand others becomes unable to understand themselves. The question is not, were they pretending? The deeper question is, did they ever truly know themselves? This question takes us to one of the oldest problems in philosophy, the difference between appearing good and becoming good. Because appearance is easy, character is difficult. Anyone can perform kindness when life is comfortable. The real test comes when our desires are challenged, when our pride is wounded, when our fears are exposed, when nobody is watching. Socrates believed that self-examination was the foundation of wisdom. A person who never examines themselves may live according to assumptions they never chose. They may spend their entire life protecting an identity created by others. And this is where Nietzsche's challenge begins. The question is not only what do you believe, the question is why do you believe it? A person may believe success is everything, but where did that belief come from? A person may believe showing emotion is weakness. Who taught them that? A person may believe I must make everyone happy. Was that wisdom or fear? The first step beyond good and evil is not becoming different. It is becoming conscious. Because before we can transform ourselves, we must first see ourselves clearly. Chapter 2: The ideas that live inside your mind. Before a person can understand the world, they must first understand the invisible system through which they see it. Every human being carries a collection of beliefs. Beliefs about success, beliefs about failure, beliefs about love, beliefs about power, beliefs about what makes a person valuable, beliefs about what makes someone good or bad. But there is a question most people rarely ask. Asterisk, where did these beliefs come from? Most people believe their thoughts are completely their own. They think, this is what I believe, this is who I am, this is how the world works. But before a person was old enough to question anything, the world had already begun teaching them. A child does not enter life knowing what success means. They do not know what status means. They do not know what society considers important. They learn. They learn from parents. They learn from teachers. They learn from friends. They learn from culture. They learn from religion. They learn from the environment around them. Slowly, thousands of messages become part of their identity. A child learns. This is what a successful person looks like. This is what a respectable person does. This is what people like me can achieve. This is what people like me cannot achieve. And something fascinating happens. The lessons we receive repeatedly become invisible. They stop feeling like ideas. They start feeling like reality. A person no longer thinks, my society taught me this. They think, this is simply the truth. This was one of Friedrich Nietzsche's greatest challenges to humanity. He believed many people lived according to values they had inherited without examination. They accepted ideas because their parents believed them, their society rewarded them, their culture repeated them, their community approved them. But Nietzsche asked, If everyone around you believes something, does that automatically make it true? This question is uncomfortable because our beliefs are connected to our identity. Changing a small opinion is easy. Changing a belief that defines who we are is much harder. Because when a belief is challenged, it can feel like we are being challenged. Imagine someone who believes, my worth comes from my career. Then one day they lose their job. The pain is not only financial. The deeper pain is, who am I now? The person did not only lose employment, they lost part of the story they used to understand themselves. Or imagine someone who believes, a strong person never shows weakness. They experience suffering. They feel afraid. They feel exhausted. But they hide these emotions because admitting them would threaten their identity. The problem is not having beliefs. Human beings need beliefs. Without beliefs, we cannot make decisions. We cannot build societies. We cannot create meaning. The problem is unconscious beliefs, beliefs we never examined, beliefs controlling our lives without our awareness. The philosopher Pierre Bourdieu studied this process. He explored how society shapes individuals through culture, environment, and social expectations. People do not simply enter society. They absorb society. They learn how to speak, how to behave, what to desire, what to consider possible. Two people can look at the same opportunity and see completely different realities. One person sees a challenge and thinks, people like me can never do that. Another person sees the same challenge and thinks, why not me? The opportunity is identical, but the internal world is different. This explains why some people limit themselves before the world ever limits them. They carry invisible boundaries, not physical walls, psychological walls, created by years of messages about who they are, what they deserve, what is possible. Psychology has revealed another powerful truth. Human beings do not always search for truth. Often we search for confirmation. Daniel Kahneman demonstrated that the human mind uses shortcuts. These shortcuts are useful. They allow us to make decisions quickly, but they can also deceive us. We notice information that supports our beliefs. We ignore information that threatens them. A person who believes nobody can be trusted will notice every betrayal, but they may ignore every act of kindness. A person who believes the world is against me will notice every unfair moment, but they may ignore opportunities they fail to take. The mind is not only a tool for discovering reality, it is also a tool for protecting identity. This is why arguments become so emotional. Two people appear to be debating an idea, but underneath they may be defending themselves. The argument is no longer, is this belief correct? The argument becomes, what happens to me if this belief is wrong? This is called cognitive dissonance. Psychologist Leon Festinger studied the discomfort people experience when reality conflicts with their beliefs. When there is conflict between what I believe about myself and what reality shows me, the mind seeks relief. Sometimes the healthiest response is, I was wrong, I need to learn, I need to change. But this requires humility. And humility is difficult because the ego wants protection. So the mind often creates another solution. It creates explanations. I had no choice. They forced me. I was right all along. Anyone would have done the same. Sometimes these explanations are true, but sometimes they are simply defenses protecting the image we have created. This is why Socrates believed self-examination was essential. The unexamined person does not truly know themselves. They may spend their entire life defending ideas they never chose. But there is another danger. When people discover that society influences their beliefs, they sometimes make another mistake. They think, everything I inherited must be wrong. They reject all traditions, all authority, all previous knowledge. But rejecting everything is not freedom. It is simply another form of being controlled. The person who blindly follows the past is controlled by tradition. The person who blindly rejects the past is controlled by rebellion. Both are reacting. Neither is truly free. A mature person does something different. They examine. They ask, what wisdom exists in what I inherited? What needs to be changed? What beliefs help humans flourish? What beliefs only create suffering? Aristotle understood this idea thousands of years ago. He believed wisdom required balance. A good life was not created by simply accepting everything, nor by rejecting everything. It was created through practical judgment, the ability to choose what develops human excellence. This is the difference between a child and a mature person. A child receives beliefs. A rebel rejects beliefs. A mature person examines beliefs. The journey of becoming an independent thinker is therefore not about having no influences. That is impossible. Every human being is influenced. The question is, will you remain unconscious of those influences, or will you become aware of them? Because freedom does not begin when you have no beliefs. Freedom begins when you understand your beliefs, when you know why you think what you think, when you know why you value what you value, when you know why you choose what you choose. The first prison a person must escape is not outside themselves, it is inside their own mind. The prison of unquestioned ideas, the beliefs inherited without examination, the assumptions mistaken for truth. But once a person begins questioning the ideas inside their mind, a new challenge appears. Because humans are not only controlled by beliefs, they are also controlled by belonging, the need to be accepted, the need to fit in, the need to remain part of the group. And sometimes that need becomes stronger than the desire for truth, because the next battle is not only inside the mind, it is between the individual and the crowd. Chapter 3, the crowd and the individual human beings have always faced the same conflict. The desire to belong and the desire to be free. We want to be accepted, we want to be understood, we want to be part of something greater than ourselves. But at the same time, we want to think independently. We want our own identity. We want to believe our choices are truly ours. This creates one of the deepest struggles in human nature. How much of yourself are you willing to sacrifice to remain accepted by others? Thousands of years ago, humans survived because they belonged to groups. A person alone was vulnerable. A person separated from the tribe faced danger. The group provided protection, food, knowledge, security. Belonging was not simply emotional, it was survival. But the same instinct that helped humans survive also created a weakness. The human mind learned, being accepted feels safe, being rejected feels dangerous, and sometimes this instinct becomes stronger than our search for truth. One of history's greatest examples was Socrates. In ancient Athens, Socrates walked through the streets asking questions. He did not command armies. He did not control wealth. He did not hold political power. His weapon was something much more dangerous: questioning. Socrates approached people who believed they were wise. He spoke with politicians. He spoke with teachers. He spoke with respected citizens. And he asked simple questions. What is justice? What is courage? What is wisdom? What makes a good life? What Socrates discovered was uncomfortable. Many people had confidence, but they lacked understanding. They had opinions, but they had not examined the foundations of those opinions. They believed they knew, but they had never truly questioned. This created a problem. People do not always appreciate someone who reveals their uncertainty. A person who exposes ignorance can become more threatening than a person who openly disagrees. Because disagreement attacks an idea, but questioning attacks identity. Eventually, Socrates was put on trial. He was accused of corrupting the youth and challenging the values of Athens. He was given the opportunity to escape, but he refused because he believed a life without principles was not worth living. Socrates' story reveals something important. The crowd can be powerful, and sometimes the crowd can be wrong. More than 2,000 years later, psychologist Solomon Asch studied this same human tendency. He wanted to understand one question: how much will people change their own judgment to agree with a group? In his famous conformity experiments, participants were shown lines of different lengths. The correct answer was obvious, but other people in the room were instructed to give the wrong answer. Something surprising happened. Many participants gave the wrong answer too. Not because they could not see the truth, but because they did not want to stand alone. This revealed something profound about human psychology. People do not only fear being wrong, they fear being isolated. The pressure of the group can make people doubt their own perception. A person begins thinking, maybe everyone else knows something I do not. Maybe I am the problem. Maybe I should stay quiet. This is why Friedrich Nietzsche warned about what he called herd mentality. The herd is not simply a group of unintelligent people. The herd represents what happens when people surrender independent thought in exchange for acceptance. The herd says, do not question, do not challenge, do not separate yourself. Think like us. The reward is belonging. The punishment is rejection. And this creates one of the greatest psychological battles, the conflict between approval and truth. Look at history. Many ideas were rejected before they became accepted. Galileo challenged the understanding of the universe. Darwin challenged humanity's understanding of life. Many social reforms were once considered impossible. Many inventions were once considered unrealistic. Progress often begins with someone willing to stand alone. But there is an important warning. Standing against the crowd does not automatically make someone correct. A person can be alone and still be wrong. A person can be different and still be foolish. A person can reject society simply because they want attention. True independence is not, I disagree with everyone. True independence is, I have examined the evidence, and I am willing to follow truth even when it is uncomfortable. This requires humility, because the same ego that fears being wrong can also enjoy feeling superior. A person can escape one crowd and create another. They can become attached to being the outsider. They can define themselves by opposition. The person who says, I refuse to think like everyone else, may still be controlled by everyone else, because their entire identity depends on resisting the group. The truly independent person does not need to constantly prove they are different. They simply think carefully. They listen. They examine. They change their mind when evidence requires it. This is why great thinkers throughout history shared one quality: intellectual humility. They understood, I may be wrong. Charles Darwin spent years examining evidence before publishing his theory of evolution. He understood the consequences of challenging existing beliefs. He also understood the importance of careful reasoning. Albert Einstein challenged classical physics, but his work was not based on simply rejecting the past. He studied the past deeply before creating something new. Innovation does not come from ignorance of tradition. It comes from understanding tradition deeply enough to improve it. This is where modern society faces a new challenge. The crowd has changed. In the past, the crowd existed mainly in villages, communities, and institutions. Today, the crowd exists digitally. Social media has created enormous invisible crowds. Millions of people can reward or punish an idea within seconds. A person can receive approval from thousands of strangers. A person can also experience public rejection from thousands of strangers. This creates a new psychological pressure. People may no longer ask, is this true? They may ask, will people approve of me if I say this? The algorithm rewards certain behaviors: strong emotions, simple answers, outrage, conflict. The most accurate idea does not always receive the most attention. The most emotionally powerful idea often does. This creates a dangerous possibility. People begin performing beliefs instead of examining beliefs. They say what creates acceptance. They defend what protects their identity. They repeat what their group expects. This connects back to Carl Jung's idea of the persona. The person creates a version of themselves designed for acceptance, but slowly, they may lose connection with their authentic self. The question becomes, who are you when the crowd disappears? When nobody is watching? When nobody is praising you? When nobody is judging you, what remains? This is the challenge of becoming an individual. Not simply separating yourself physically from others, but developing an inner foundation strong enough that you can belong without being controlled. A mature person does not hate the crowd. They understand the crowd. They learn from society. They appreciate tradition. They cooperate with others. But they maintain the ability to think, because society gives us language, knowledge, culture, opportunity. We need others. The mistake is believing we must surrender ourselves completely to belong. The goal is not isolation. The goal is conscious participation, to stand among others without losing yourself. But there is another battle that begins after a person separates from the crowd, because even after escaping external approval, another challenge remains: the hidden world inside the individual, the emotions we reject, the desires we hide, the weaknesses we deny, the parts of ourselves we do not want to face. The crowd may influence us from outside, but the shadow influences us from within. And to understand human nature fully, we must enter the darkest and most misunderstood part of ourselves, the hidden self, the shadow we carry. Isaiah chapter 4, the mask you wear and the shadow you hide. Every human being lives with two versions of themselves: the person they show the world and the person they experience privately. The first is carefully presented. The second is often hidden. We all learn how to perform. A child learns very early which behaviors receive approval, which emotions are accepted, which parts of themselves create connection, and which parts create rejection. Slowly, every person develops a social identity, a version of themselves designed to function in the world. The confident professional, the caring parent, the responsible leader, the reliable friend, the successful person. These identities are not necessarily fake, they are necessary. Society requires people to control impulses and behave responsibly. A doctor cannot act on every emotion during surgery. A leader cannot express every frustration in public. A parent cannot follow every impulse. Human beings need discipline. They need a social self. But the problem begins when the mask becomes more important than the person wearing it. When someone becomes so attached to appearing a certain way that they can no longer admit the truth about themselves. The Swiss psychologist Carl Jung spent much of his life studying this hidden conflict. He believed every person has what he called a astris personast. The persona is the face we present to the world. It is the identity we create to interact with society. But Jung also identified another part of human personality, the part we hide, the part we reject, the part we do not want others to see. He called it the shadow. The shadow is not simply evil. This is one of the biggest misunderstandings. The shadow is not a monster inside us. It is everything within ourselves that we refuse to acknowledge. The person who believes I am always patient may hide anger. The person who believes I do not care about recognition may hide a deep desire for approval. The person who believes I am completely selfless may hide a need to feel important. Every human being contains contradictions. We can love and hate. We can be generous and selfish. We can be courageous and afraid. We can be compassionate and resentful. The mature person understands these contradictions. The immature person denies them. And this is where a dangerous pattern begins. When people refuse to acknowledge parts of themselves, those parts do not disappear. They simply move into the unconscious. And what remains unconscious can influence behavior without permission. Imagine a person who believes, I am a peaceful person. They avoid every disagreement. They never express frustration. They always surrender. Everyone sees them as calm. But inside, resentment slowly grows. They begin thinking, nobody respects me. Everyone uses me. I always sacrifice. The person believes their suffering comes only from others. But perhaps the deeper problem is that they never learned the difference between kindness and weakness. They never learned how to set boundaries. They never learned how to express themselves honestly. This is one of the most important lessons of psychology. A virtue without awareness can become a weakness. Kindness without boundaries becomes self-destruction. Humility without confidence becomes self-rejection. Patience without honesty becomes silent resentment. Forgiveness without understanding becomes repeated suffering. This does not mean these virtues are wrong. It means every virtue requires wisdom. Aristotle understood this thousands of years ago. He argued that virtue exists between extremes. Courage exists between cowardice and recklessness. Generosity exists between selfishness and waste. Confidence exists between insecurity and arrogance. The goal is not to remove one side. The goal is balance. This connects deeply with Nietzsche's criticism of human morality. Nietzsche questioned whether people always acted from genuine strength. He asked, are people choosing these behaviors because they are powerful enough to choose them, or because they are afraid? For example, a person says, I do not compete because I am humble, but is it humility, or fear of discovering their limitations? A person then says, I do not want success because money is meaningless, but is that wisdom, or disappointment from never achieving it? A person says, I forgive everyone, but is it forgiveness or fear of confrontation? These questions are uncomfortable because they challenge the image we have built of ourselves. Most people want to believe, my motives are pure, but human motivation is rarely simple. The psychologist Sigmund Freud explored a similar idea through the unconscious mind. Although many aspects of Freud's theories remain debated, his influence came from one powerful insight. Human beings are not always fully aware of why they do what they do. Modern psychology continues exploring this idea. Researchers study bias, emotional regulation, self-deception, defense mechanisms, identity protection. The human mind is not only trying to discover truth, it is also trying to protect the person from psychological pain. This explains why admitting mistakes can feel so difficult. A mistake is not only information. Sometimes it feels like an attack on identity. A person who believes, "I am intelligent," may struggle to admit ignorance. A person who believes, "I am kind," may struggle to admit cruelty. A person who believes, "I am independent," may struggle to admit needing help. The ego often prefers a comfortable illusion over a painful truth. History gives us powerful examples of this pattern. Consider Napoleon Bonaparte. Few people in history demonstrated ambition like Napoleon. He possessed extraordinary qualities: strategic intelligence, discipline, confidence, leadership ability. He transformed France and reshaped Europe. But the same qualities that helped him rise also contained a danger. His confidence could become overconfidence. His ambition could become expansion. His belief in his own ability could make him underestimate reality. This is the shadow of greatness. Every strength contains a possible weakness. Ambition creates achievement, but uncontrolled ambition creates obsession. Confidence creates courage, but uncontrolled confidence creates arrogance. Leadership creates influence, but uncontrolled leadership creates domination. The question is not, how do I remove my weaknesses? The deeper question is, how do I understand the hidden side of my strengths? This is why self-knowledge is more important than self-image. Self-image asks, how do I want people to see me? Self-knowledge asks, who am I when nobody is watching? The modern world makes this challenge even harder. Today, people constantly create public identities. Social media allows us to display success, happiness, confidence, morality, achievement. But behind every image is a human being. Someone who struggles, someone who doubts, someone who experiences emotions they do not show. The danger is not having a private struggle. Everyone has one. The danger is creating a life where protecting the image becomes more important than becoming better. A person who denies their anger cannot learn to control it. A person who denies their jealousy cannot overcome it. A person who denies their insecurity cannot develop true confidence. The first step toward mastery is awareness. You cannot control what you refuse to see. This is why Jung believed the goal of life was not perfection. It was integration. To bring the hidden parts of yourself into consciousness. Not to obey every impulse, not to celebrate every desire, but to understand them. A person who understands their anger can choose how to use it. They can defend someone. They can protect boundaries. They can fight injustice. A person who understands their ambition can pursue excellence without becoming obsessed with status. A person who understands their desire for recognition can seek achievement without becoming a slave to applause. This is true psychological freedom. Not having no darkness, but knowing your darkness, not having no weaknesses, but understanding them. The mature person does not say, "I have no shadow." The mature person says, "I know my shadow exists, and I choose how to respond to it." Because the greatest danger is not that humans have hidden parts. The greatest danger is pretending they do not exist. But once a person begins understanding their hidden self, another difficult question appears. If some of our morality is mixed with fear, if some of our kindness hides insecurity, if some of our beliefs protect our ego, then what happens? Do we lose our sense of right and wrong? Or can we build a deeper morality based on awareness rather than appearance? Because sometimes the greatest disguise is not pretending to be evil. Sometimes the greatest disguise is pretending to be good. And this leads us to one of Nietzsche's most controversial questions. Asterisk, can morality itself become a shield that hides the truth about who we are? When morality becomes a shield, human beings have a powerful desire, the desire to see themselves as good. We want to believe that our intentions are pure, that our decisions are justified, that our actions are reasonable. Very few people wake up and think, "I want to become a bad person." Almost everyone believes they are acting for a reason. They believe they are protecting something, defending something, helping someone, doing what is necessary. But this creates one of the most difficult questions in human psychology. Can a person use goodness to hide from the truth about themselves? Can morality become a shield? Throughout history, philosophers have struggled with this question. What makes a person truly good? Is goodness simply following rules? Is it obeying traditions? Is it appearing respectable? Or does true goodness require something deeper? Self-awareness. Because two people can perform the same action while being driven by completely different forces. One person helps someone because they genuinely care. Another helps someone because they want admiration. One person forgives because they have found peace. Another forgives because they are afraid of confrontation. One person sacrifices because they love. Another sacrifices because they need to feel needed. The action may look identical, but the psychology behind it is different. This was one of Friedrich Nietzsche's most controversial ideas. He challenged people to look beneath moral behavior, not because morality was meaningless, but because human beings are often not completely honest about their own motivations. Nietzsche asked, when a person says they are acting for justice, what else might be influencing them? When a person says, I only want what is right, is it only justice? Or is there also anger? Is there also pride? Is there also the desire to defeat someone? This question does not mean people are secretly evil. It means human beings are complicated. A person can genuinely care about justice and still have personal emotions involved. A person can genuinely love others and still desire recognition. A person can genuinely want peace and still fear conflict. The challenge is learning to separate the action from the motivation behind it. Imagine someone says, I never get angry. At first this sounds admirable, but another question appears. Why? Is it because they have mastered their emotions? Or because they are afraid of expressing disagreement? A person who cannot express anger is not always peaceful. Sometimes they are powerless. A person who cannot say no is not always generous. Sometimes they are afraid of rejection. A person who never challenges others is not always humble. Sometimes they fear conflict. This is where psychology becomes important. The same behavior can come from strength or weakness. The outside appearance does not always reveal the internal reality. Carl Jung's idea of the shadow explains why. The parts of ourselves that we refuse to acknowledge do not disappear. They remain hidden, and hidden emotions often find indirect ways to express themselves. A person who refuses to admit anger may become passive-aggressive, resentful, cold. A person who refuses to admit ambition may become jealous, critical, bitter towards successful people. A person who refuses to admit insecurity may constantly seek approval. The emotion has not disappeared, it has simply changed form. This is why self-examination is uncomfortable, because sometimes the person we need to understand most is ourselves. The ancient philosopher Aristotle approached morality differently from Nietzsche. Aristotle believed that becoming good was not mainly about rules. It was about developing character. A person becomes courageous by practicing courage. A person becomes honest by practicing honesty. A person becomes wise by practicing wisdom. But Aristotle also understood balance. Too much of a good quality can become harmful. Courage without wisdom becomes recklessness. Generosity without judgment becomes foolishness. Confidence without humility becomes arrogance. This creates an important lesson. Good qualities require discipline. Even virtues need guidance. Robert Greene explores a similar idea in his studies of human nature. He argues that people often disguise their true motives. A person may say, I am only trying to help, but underneath may exist, I want control, I want recognition, I want to feel superior. Again, this does not mean every good action is fake. The lesson is not to become cynical. The lesson is to become aware. A person who believes, my intentions are always pure, has created a dangerous blind spot. Because once someone believes they are automatically good, they stop examining themselves. And when self-examination disappears, growth stops. History shows why this matters. Some of the worst actions committed by human beings were not performed by people who believed they were evil. They were performed by people who believed they were doing something necessary. They believed the cause is more important than individuals. The enemy deserves punishment. The sacrifice is justified. The outcome matters more than the method. This is where morality can become dangerous, not because morality itself is harmful, but because a person who believes they possess absolute moral certainty can stop questioning themselves. The philosopher Hannah Arendt has studied this problem while examining the behavior of people involved in destructive systems. One of her important insights was that terrible actions are not always committed by extraordinary monsters. Sometimes they happen through ordinary people who stop thinking independently. people who surrender personal judgment, people who hide behind roles and instructions. The question changes from, am I doing what my group believes is right, to, have I personally examined whether this is right? This is the difference between morality and moral consciousness. A person can follow rules without understanding. A person can repeat values without examining them. A person can defend a cause without questioning themselves. But a truly moral person develops something deeper, the courage to question themselves. They ask, am I helping or am I controlling? Am I forgiving or am I avoiding? Am I defending justice or am I seeking revenge? Am I being humble or am I afraid? This does not mean a person should constantly doubt themselves. Too much self-doubt becomes another weakness. The goal is not endless guilt. The goal is awareness. A mature person understands, I am capable of good. I am capable of mistakes. I am capable of helping. I am capable of harming. Therefore, I must remain conscious. The greatest danger is not that human beings have selfish desires. Every human being does. The greatest danger is believing we are incapable of selfishness. The person who understands their own darkness is less likely to be controlled by it. The person who understands their own weaknesses is less likely to judge others unfairly. The person who understands their own motives is more capable of acting with integrity. The journey beyond good and evil is not about destroying morality. It is about developing a deeper morality. A morality built not only on appearance, but on understanding. Not only on what others see, but on who we truly are. But there is another force that can corrupt morality even further. A force that turns pain into hatred. A force that transforms disappointment into blame. A force that allows people to protect their ego by making the world responsible for their suffering. It is one of the most powerful and destructive emotions in human nature, resentment. And to understand humanity, we must understand the prison of resentment. Group 6. The prison of resentment. There is an emotion that can quietly take control of a person's entire life. It does not always appear as anger. Sometimes it appears as disappointment. Sometimes it appears as disappointment that was never healed. Sometimes it appears as a feeling that the world owes us something. A person begins with a wound. Then the wound becomes a story. The story becomes an identity. And eventually the person is no longer simply carrying pain. They are living through it. This is resentment. Resentment is one of the deepest and most complicated forces in human psychology. Because unlike ordinary anger, resentment does not disappear quickly. Anger can come and go. Resentment stays. It remembers. It collects evidence. It creates a permanent connection between the person and the thing that hurt them. Friedrich Nietzsche studied this emotion deeply. He used the French word *ressentiment, tasked to describe a psychological state where people experience frustration, powerlessness, and dissatisfaction, but cannot transform those feelings into action. Instead of changing themselves or their circumstances, they change the way they interpret the world. A person experiences failure. They have two choices. They can ask, what can I learn from this? What can I improve? What responsibility do I have? Or they can ask, who is responsible for my suffering? Who should I blame? Who deserves punishment? The first path creates growth. The second path creates resentment. This does not mean every person who experiences injustice is simply being resentful. Real suffering exists. Real unfairness exists. Real victims exist. The world is not always fair. People are sometimes genuinely harmed by others. The question is not whether pain is real. The question is, what does pain transform you into? Two people can experience the same difficulty and become completely different. One person experiences failure and becomes wiser. Another experiences failure and becomes bitter. One person experiences rejection and becomes stronger. Another experiences rejection and begins hating those who succeed. One person experiences suffering and develops compassion. Another experiences suffering and develops the desire to make others suffer. The event is not the only thing that shapes a person. The meaning they give that event also shapes them. This was one of the greatest lessons from Viktor Frankl. Frankl was a psychiatrist who survived Nazi concentration camps. He experienced one of the darkest periods in human history. He lost his freedom, he lost his possessions, he lost his family members, he witnessed unimaginable cruelty. Yet Frankl noticed something remarkable. Even in extreme suffering, some people maintained inner dignity. They still showed kindness. They still helped others. They still found reasons to continue. Frankl concluded that although human beings cannot always control what happens to them, they still possess a final freedom, the ability to choose their response. This idea does not make suffering easy. It does not erase injustice. It does not mean people should accept abuse. It means there is another battle after the external battle. The first battle is, what happened to me? The second battle is, what will this make me become? This is where resentment becomes dangerous, because resentment creates a false sense of power. A person who feels powerless can feel powerful when they have someone to hate. Hatred provides direction. Blame provides an explanation. Anger provides energy. But underneath, the person remains trapped. Their life becomes organized around the thing they claim to hate. Imagine a person who was betrayed many years ago. The person who hurt them has moved on. They are living their life. But the injured person continues replaying the event every day. The past is still controlling the present. The person believes they are keeping the memory alive, but often they are keeping the wound alive. This is why resentment is a prison. The person believes they are punishing someone else, but often they are imprisoning themselves. Fyodor Dostoevsky explored this perfectly in his novel Notes from Underground. His main character is intelligent, deeply aware, highly educated, but he is trapped by resentment. He understands his own weaknesses. He understands his own contradictions. But he refuses transformation. Why? Because change would require humility. It would require accepting responsibility. It would require admitting, maybe I have contributed to my own suffering. Sometimes people hold on to resentment because letting go creates a frightening question. If I stop blaming them, what responsibility do I have for my future? Blame can become comfortable. It explains everything. It requires no change. This is why resentment is so attractive. It protects the ego. If my failures are always someone else's fault, I never have to confront my own weaknesses. If every successful person is dishonest, I never have to confront my own lack of discipline. If the world is always against me, I never have to ask what I can improve. Nietzsche believed resentment could even influence morality. A person may begin calling something wrong because they genuinely believe it is wrong, or because that thing represents something they desire but cannot obtain. For example, a person says ambitious people are selfish. Sometimes this is true. Some ambitious people are selfish. But another question must be asked. Is this a moral observation? Or is it frustration toward people who achieved something we wanted? A person says money destroys people. Sometimes money does reveal bad character. But another question, is the criticism coming from wisdom or from disappointment? The purpose of this examination is not to accuse everyone of hidden jealousy. That would itself become another form of cynicism. The purpose is self-awareness, because resentment can disguise itself as justice. A person may believe, I am fighting for what is right, but underneath may exist, I want someone else to suffer because I suffered. The difference between justice and revenge is subtle. Justice seeks to correct, revenge seeks to satisfy pain. Justice asks, how do we prevent this harm from happening again? Revenge asks, how do I make them feel what I felt? Nelson Mandela represents one of history's greatest examples of overcoming resentment. For 27 years, he was imprisoned under apartheid. He experienced injustice personally. He experienced humiliation. He experienced loss. When he finally gained power, he faced a choice. He could use his position to punish those who had oppressed him. Many people would have understood. Many people would have supported revenge. But Mandela chose reconciliation, not because the past did not matter, not because injustice was acceptable, but because he understood something deeper. A person controlled by hatred is still controlled by the thing they hate. This is one of the highest forms of strength, not pretending pain does not exist, not denying injustice, but refusing to allow suffering to destroy your character. Erich Fromm wrote about a similar human tendency. He argued that people sometimes escape the responsibility of freedom by surrendering themselves to destructive emotions and identities. Resentment can become an identity. The person no longer asks, who can I become? They only ask, why did this happen to me? Modern psychology has explored similar patterns through victim identity. Again, this does not mean victims are responsible for what happened to them. That would be both inaccurate and cruel. The deeper lesson is, A person's past should not have unlimited power over their future. Healing does not mean saying, "It did not matter." Healing means, "It happened, but it will not define everything I become." Forgiveness is often misunderstood. Forgiveness does not mean the person was right, the harm was acceptable, the injustice did not matter. Forgiveness means, I refuse to allow this event to control my future. The opposite of resentment is not weakness, it is transformation. Turning pain into wisdom, turning failure into growth, turning suffering into meaning. The mature person does not ask only, "Who hurt me?" They also ask, "What is this experience teaching me? What kind of person am I becoming? What responsibility belongs to me?" Because resentment keeps a person looking backward. Growth requires moving forward. The past can be a teacher, but it cannot become your permanent home. Yet resentment is not the only force shaping human beings. There is another question even deeper. What happens when people lose the beliefs that give their lives meaning? What happens when old answers disappear? What happens when humans have freedom but no direction? Because human beings cannot live without meaning. If one source of meaning disappears, something else will always try to replace it. And this brings us to one of Nietzsche's greatest warnings, the crisis of meaning, the search for purpose in a world that no longer knows what it believes. Chapter 7, The Death of Meaning. Every human being is searching for something, not only food, not only shelter, not only comfort, something deeper, a reason to wake up, a reason to continue, a reason to sacrifice, a reason to believe that their life matters. Throughout history, civilizations have been built around answers to these questions. Why are we here? What is the purpose of suffering? What makes a person good? What should we dedicate our lives to? These answers created the foundations of societies they shaped: families, cultures, moral systems, traditions, civilizations. But what happens when those foundations begin to collapse? What happens when the stories that gave people meaning no longer convince them? What happens when human beings gain more freedom but lose their sense of direction? This was one of Friedrich Nietzsche's deepest concerns. When Nietzsche wrote, "God is dead," many people misunderstood his meaning. He was not simply celebrating the decline of religion. He was describing a massive cultural transformation. For centuries, many societies had organized their understanding of morality, purpose, human value, life after death, good and evil, around religious frameworks. These beliefs provided a structure through which people understood existence. But the modern world began changing. Science expanded. Traditional institutions were questioned. Old explanations were challenged. Human beings gained new knowledge about the universe. But Nietzsche recognized a problem. Destroying an old foundation does not automatically create a new one. Imagine a building. For generations, people have lived inside it. They know its rooms. They know its structure. They trust its foundation. Then one day, someone discovers the foundation has cracks. The discovery may be true, but the question remains, what happens next? Do you rebuild? Do you repair? Do you create something new? Nietzsche believed humanity was entering a period of uncertainty. The old values were weakening, but new values had not yet fully developed. The danger was not simply losing belief. The danger was losing meaning. Because humans are not creatures that live on facts alone. We need purpose. We need a reason why our actions matter. A person can have information and still feel lost. A person can have comfort and still feel empty. A person can have freedom and still not know what to do with it. This is where Viktor Frankl's work becomes essential. Frankl was a psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor. During his imprisonment in Nazi concentration camps, he witnessed some of the worst suffering humans have ever experienced. People lost their homes, their possessions, their freedom, their loved ones, their futures. Yet Frankl noticed something extraordinary. Some people maintained inner strength despite unbearable circumstances. They still found reasons to live. They still showed kindness. They still protected their dignity. Frankl concluded that human beings can endure enormous suffering when they have meaning. His famous insight was, those who have a why to live can endure almost anyhow. The lesson was not that suffering is good. Suffering is painful. Suffering destroys. Suffering should not be romanticized. The lesson was something different. Meaning changes how humans experience suffering. A person with no purpose can be destroyed by small difficulties. A person with deep purpose can endure enormous challenges. Consider two people facing the same hardship. One asks, "Why is this happening to me?" The other asks, "What can I build from this?" The situation is the same, but the meaning is different, and the meaning changes the person. This is why humans have always created stories larger than themselves. People build families, they create art, they serve communities, they defend nations, they pursue discoveries, they sacrifice for future generations. Why? Because human beings want their existence to matter. Psychologist Ernest Becker explored this idea in his book, The Denial of Death. He argued that much of human behavior is influenced by our awareness of mortality. Humans know something unique. We know we will die. This creates a psychological challenge. How does a creature that knows it is temporary create a meaningful life? According to Becker, humans seek symbolic forms of immortality. They want to leave something behind. A legacy, a contribution, a memory, a story. This explains why people build, why people create, why people chase achievement, why people want recognition. The desire is not always simply greed. Sometimes it is a deeper human desire. I want my existence to matter. But this creates another danger. When people lose healthy sources of meaning, they often replace them with weaker ones. A person may replace meaning with money. Their entire identity becomes, "What do I own?" Another person may replace meaning with status. Their identity becomes, "How important do others think I am?" Another person may replace meaning with ideology. Their identity becomes, "My group is right and everyone else is wrong." Another person may replace meaning with pleasure. Their goal becomes, "How can I avoid discomfort?" The problem is not money. The problem is not achievement. The problem is not pleasure. These things can be valuable. The problem begins when they become the highest purpose of life, because no external achievement can permanently answer the deepest human questions. A person can become wealthy and still wonder, "Why am I here?" A person can become famous and still wonder, "Does anyone truly know me?" A person can achieve everything society celebrates and still feel empty. This is the modern crisis. Many people have more choices than previous generations, but more choices do not automatically create more meaning. Sometimes unlimited choices create confusion. The philosopher Erich Fromm explored this problem in his book, Escape from Freedom. He argued that freedom creates anxiety, because freedom means responsibility, and responsibility is frightening. A person may say, "I want freedom," but freedom requires making decisions, accepting consequences, choosing values, creating direction. Many people escape this responsibility by allowing something else to decide for them. Society decides, the crowd decides, the algorithm decides, the culture decides. The person says, "I am living my own life." But they are following a script they never examined. This connects back to Nietzsche. His challenge was not simply, destroy old values. His challenge was, become conscious of the values guiding your life. Because when humans do not consciously choose meaning, something else will choose it for them. Modern society provides countless replacements for meaning. The marketplace tells us buy more. The attention economy tells us be seen. Social groups tell us belong to us. The culture tells us become this, reject that. The danger is not having influences. Every human being has influences. The danger is becoming unconscious of them. Carl Jung believed many modern people suffer because they are disconnected from deeper meaning. They become focused only on external achievements. They build a successful outer life while neglecting the inner world. A person can have a good career, a comfortable home, a respected image, and still feel something missing. Because human beings need more than success, they need significance. This is why many people experience identity crises. They achieve what they were told to achieve. Then they ask, was this really what I wanted? They followed the path, but they never asked, is this my path? However, when people lose old meanings, another danger appears. They may conclude, nothing matters, this is nihilism. The belief that life has no objective meaning or value. At first, nihilism can feel freeing. If nothing matters, then nothing can judge you. If nothing matters, then responsibility becomes optional. If nothing matters, then failure becomes easier to accept. But eventually, nihilism creates emptiness. Because humans cannot survive without something worth pursuing, something worth protecting, something worth sacrificing for. This is why Nietzsche feared nihilism. He understood that when humans lose meaning, they do not simply become free, they become vulnerable. They begin searching desperately for something to believe in. And history shows that humans will attach themselves to almost anything that provides identity. A nation, a movement, a leader, a belief system, a lifestyle, a status symbol. The question is not, do humans need meaning? They do. The question is the meaning we choose making us better? A meaningful life is not simply a life where we feel good. It is a life where we become better. A life where we accept responsibility. A life where our actions contribute beyond ourselves. Aristotle believed this was the purpose of human existence. Not pleasure alone, but flourishing. Becoming the best version of what a human being can become. Frankl believed meaning comes through responsibility. The question is not only, what do I want from life? The deeper question is, what does life require from me? The Stoics believed meaning comes through living according to wisdom, doing what is right, controlling what you can, accepting what you cannot. Together, these thinkers reveal a powerful truth. Meaning is not something we passively receive. Meaning is something we build through our choices. Every person eventually faces the same questions. What is worth sacrificing for? What values will guide me when life becomes difficult? What kind of person am I trying to become? Because the greatest danger is not living without answers. The greatest danger is accepting answers without thinking. A person who never chooses their highest values will eventually become controlled by someone else's. And this leads us to one of the greatest challenges of human freedom. If we are free to question old values, if we are free to create ourselves, if we are free to choose our own direction, then what limits should guide us? Can every person simply create their own truth? Or does freedom require responsibility? Because freedom without responsibility is not liberation. It is another form of chaos. And this brings us to the next question. What happens when human beings try to create themselves without accepting responsibility for what they become? Chapter 8, The Dangerous Freedom of Creating Yourself. Freedom is one of humanity's greatest dreams. People have fought wars for it. People have sacrificed their lives for it. People have crossed oceans searching for it. But freedom creates a question that is rarely asked. Asterisk, freedom for what? A person can be free from control and still be controlled. A person can escape society's expectations and still become a prisoner of their own desires. A person can reject every tradition and still have no idea who they are. Because freedom alone does not create a meaningful life. Freedom creates a responsibility, the responsibility to decide what is worth pursuing. This was one of Friedrich Nietzsche's greatest challenges to humanity. He believed that many people live according to values they inherited. They follow the beliefs of their parents. They follow the expectations of their culture. They follow the standards of society. But they rarely stop and ask, are these values truly mine? Nietzsche believed that after questioning inherited values, humans faced a new challenge. They could not simply destroy old beliefs and remain empty. They had to create. They had to overcome themselves. They had to become active participants in shaping their own existence. This idea is often misunderstood. Some people hear create yourself, and they interpret it as do whatever you want. My desires define what is right. I do not answer to anyone. But this interpretation misses the deeper meaning. Nietzsche was not arguing for unlimited selfishness. His challenge was not follow every impulse. His challenge was become the person capable of consciously choosing your highest values. There is a difference between expressing yourself and being controlled by yourself. A person controlled by anger is not free. A person controlled by addiction is not free. A person controlled by the need for approval is not free. A person controlled by every desire that appears in their mind is not free. True freedom requires mastery. This is why ancient Stoic philosophers approached freedom differently. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor and philosopher, had enormous external power. He commanded armies. He ruled an empire. He possessed wealth and influence. Yet his writings focused on one central battle against himself. He wrote about controlling, anger, fear, pride, desire, because he understood something important. A person who cannot control themselves is not truly powerful. They are controlled by whatever emotion or impulse appears. This idea connects with modern psychology. Many people believe freedom means having unlimited choices, but choices alone do not create freedom. A person can have thousands of options and still lack direction. A person can have unlimited entertainment and still feel empty. A person can have complete independence and still be controlled by insecurity. Freedom without wisdom can become another prison. Imagine a person who says, "I do whatever I want." At first, this sounds powerful, but ask a deeper question. Who is controlling the want? Is it your highest values? Or your temporary emotions? Is it your purpose or your impulses? Is it your conscious choice or your hidden fears? This is why Viktor Frankl's ideas are important. Frankl experienced a situation where almost every freedom was removed. He was imprisoned. He had no control over his environment, no control over his circumstances, no control over what others did to him. Yet he discovered something profound. There was one freedom that remained, the freedom to choose his response. This does not mean people can control everything that happens to them. They cannot. Life contains suffering, uncertainty, and unfairness. But between what happens and how we respond, there exists a space. And within that space exists responsibility. This is where freedom becomes meaningful. Not the ability to do anything, the ability to choose what is worth doing. Aristotle approached this question from another direction. He did not focus on creating values. He focused on creating character. For Aristotle, the good life was not about asking, "What do I desire?" It was asking, "What kind of person should I become?" This distinction separates maturity from immaturity. An immature person asks, "What do I want?" A mature person asks, "What is worth wanting?" A person may want revenge, but should they pursue revenge? A person may want wealth at any cost, but should they sacrifice their integrity? A person may want recognition, but should they destroy relationships to obtain it? Human greatness comes from learning to govern desire. This is why Nietzsche, Aristotle, and Stoicism ultimately meet at the same place. The greatest human achievement is not controlling the world. It is controlling yourself. But self-creation becomes difficult because the modern world constantly tries to create us. Every day we receive messages telling us what to desire, what to fear, what success looks like, what happiness looks like, what kind of person we should become. The attention economy studies human psychology. It learns what attracts us, what keeps us watching, what creates emotional reactions. A person may believe, "I am expressing my true self," but sometimes they are simply responding to external rewards, likes, approval, recognition, acceptance. Carl Jung warned about this danger. A person can spend their entire life building a persona, a successful image, a respected identity, a version of themselves designed for others. But beneath the image, the real question remains. Who are you when nobody is watching? Self-creation begins with self-knowledge. Before asking, "Who do I want to become?" a person must ask, "Who am I? What controls me? What weaknesses do I avoid? What fears influence my decisions? What values are worth suffering for?" Because without self-awareness, self-creation can become another form of self-deception. A person may believe they are building themselves, but they may simply be creating a more attractive mask. This is why Erich Fromm wrote about the human tendency to escape freedom. Freedom sounds attractive, but freedom also creates anxiety because freedom means responsibility. Many people secretly prefer having someone else decide. They want someone to tell them what to believe, what to value, what path to follow, because responsibility is heavy. A person may complain, "I want freedom." But what they actually want is freedom from consequences. They want choices without accountability. They want independence without responsibility. But every meaningful freedom carries responsibility. A parent is free to make choices, but responsible for a child. A leader is free to make decisions, but responsible for consequences. A person is free to choose their path, but responsible for who they become. This is the paradox of human existence. The more freedom we receive, the more responsibility we must accept. Nietzsche challenged humanity to stop being passive. He challenged people to become creators rather than followers. But creation requires wisdom. A person creating themselves must ask, "Am I becoming stronger? Am I becoming wiser? Am I becoming more capable of contributing?" Because the goal of self-creation is not superiority. It is development. The person who creates themselves only to dominate others has misunderstood strength. The person who creates themselves to master themselves has discovered wisdom. The highest form of freedom is not having no limits. It is developing the character required to choose wisely. A musician is not free because they refuse discipline. They become free after years of practice allow them to express themselves. An athlete is not free because they avoid training. They become free because training expands their ability. A person is not free because they reject all values. They become free when they consciously choose values worth living for. The journey of creating yourself is therefore not about becoming anything you want. It is about becoming the person you are capable of becoming. And this raises the final challenge. If we develop ourselves, if we pursue greatness, if we seek power over ourselves, how do we prevent strength from becoming cruelty? How do we become powerful without becoming arrogant? How do we become confident without becoming blind? How do we rise without losing our humanity? Because history is filled with people who gained power, but far fewer people learned how to carry it. And this brings us to the next question. Asterisk, what does it take to become strong without becoming cruel? I-9 becoming strong without becoming cruel throughout history. Human beings have searched for strength. Kings wanted it, warriors wanted it, leaders wanted it, entrepreneurs wanted it, ordinary people wanted it, because strength appears to offer protection. A strong person cannot easily be controlled. A strong person can overcome obstacles. A strong person can influence the world around them. But strength creates one of the greatest challenges in human development. Asterisk, what kind of strength should we pursue? Because history reveals something uncomfortable. Strength can create greatness, but strength without wisdom can create destruction. The same qualities that allow a person to rise can also become the qualities that destroy them. Ambition can create achievement, but uncontrolled ambition can create obsession. Confidence can create courage, but uncontrolled confidence can create arrogance. Power can create change, but uncontrolled power can create oppression. The challenge is not simply becoming strong. The challenge is becoming strong without losing your humanity. This was one of Friedrich Nietzsche's greatest concerns. Nietzsche believed humans should strive toward what he called self-overcoming. The idea was simple but demanding. A person should not remain trapped by their weaknesses. They should develop, they should transform, they should overcome the limitations that prevent them from reaching their potential. But self-overcoming was never meant to mean becoming superior to others. It was not about standing above people. It was about rising above your previous self. The greatest enemy is not always another person. Sometimes the greatest enemy is your fear, your laziness, your resentment, your need for approval, your inability to control yourself. The person who conquers others may gain power, but the person who conquers themselves gains freedom. History gives us many examples of people who possessed extraordinary strength, but the difference between greatness and destruction often came down to one thing: whether they could govern themselves. Consider Abraham Lincoln. Lincoln was not born into privilege. He grew up in difficult conditions. He experienced poverty. He experienced personal loss. He experienced repeated failures. Before becoming president, Lincoln suffered political defeats that could have broken many people. He lost elections. He experienced disappointment. He struggled with depression. Life repeatedly gave him reasons to become bitter, but his suffering developed something within him: patience, humility, understanding, compassion. When Lincoln became president, America entered one of its darkest periods. The country was divided. The Civil War threatened to destroy the nation. Millions of lives depended on his decisions. At that moment, power revealed his character. A weaker person with power may seek revenge. They may use victory to humiliate enemies. They may confuse punishment with justice. Lincoln chose something different. He understood that winning a war was not enough. A nation also had to heal. This is a powerful lesson. Strength is not only the ability to defeat an opponent. Strength is the ability to control what you do with victory. The Stoic philosophers understood this thousands of years ago. Marcus Aurelius was one of the most powerful men in the ancient world. He was emperor of Rome. He commanded armies. He possessed enormous authority. Yet when he wrote his private reflections, he did not focus on domination. He focused on discipline. He reminded himself, control your anger, control your ego, control your desires, control your reactions. Why? Because he understood the person who cannot control themselves is not truly powerful. A person controlled by anger can be manipulated by anyone who knows how to provoke them. A person controlled by pride can be destroyed by criticism. A person controlled by desire can become a slave to temptation. External power means little without internal power. This is why modern society often misunderstands strength. Many people think strength means never apologizing, never admitting mistakes, never showing emotion, always winning, always appearing confident. But this is often a fragile form of strength because it depends on maintaining an image. A stronger person can say, "I was wrong, I need to learn, I need help. I do not have all the answers." Humility is not weakness. Humility is accurate self-awareness. It is seeing yourself clearly. Carl Jung believed this was essential. A person who wants to become whole must confront their shadow, because power does not create character. Power reveals character. Give power to an insecure person, and they may become controlling. Give power to a resentful person, and they may seek revenge. Give power to a selfish person, and they may exploit others. But give power to a disciplined person, and they may create something valuable. This is why leadership begins with self-leadership. Before someone can responsibly influence others, they must learn to govern themselves. Nelson Mandela represents one of history's greatest examples of this principle. After spending 27 years imprisoned under apartheid, Mandela had every reason to seek revenge. He had suffered. He had been denied freedom. He had experienced injustice. When he finally gained political power, he faced a choice. He could use power to punish those who had oppressed him, or he could use power to rebuild. He chose reconciliation, not because he forgot the past, not because injustice did not matter, but because he understood something deeper. Hatred can become another prison. A person controlled by hatred is still controlled by the person who caused the hatred. This is one of the highest forms of strength, having the ability to destroy, but choosing creation instead. Viktor Frankl discovered a similar principle through suffering. Even when prisoners lost almost every external freedom, some maintained dignity. They controlled something internal, their response, their attitude, their humanity. Frankl showed that circumstances influence us, but they do not completely define us. This is where true strength separates itself from aggression. Aggression is often a reaction. Strength is a choice. An aggressive person says, "I must prove I am powerful." A strong person thinks, "I already know who I am." An aggressive person needs enemies. A strong person does not. An aggressive person is controlled by emotions. A strong person can experience emotions without being controlled by them. Aristotle described this balance through the idea of virtue. He believed excellence exists between extremes. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is acting correctly despite fear. Confidence is not believing you are better than everyone. It is trusting yourself while recognizing your limitations. Ambition is not evil. Without ambition, humans would never create, discover, or build. But ambition without wisdom destroys the person pursuing it. Robert Greene explores this danger through the study of human nature. He argues that success often creates a dangerous illusion. "I achieve this because I am exceptional." The person forgets the people who helped them, the opportunities they received, the knowledge they inherited, the circumstances that supported them. Success can make people blind. They begin believing they are entirely self-created. This is why humility becomes more important as a person rises. The higher someone climbs, the more dangerous unconscious ego becomes. A person with little influence may damage a few relationships. A person with enormous influence may damage thousands or millions of lives. Greatness requires not only developing strengths, it requires managing those strengths. The goal is not to remove ambition. The goal is to direct ambition. The goal is not to eliminate pride. The goal is to prevent pride from controlling you. The goal is not to eliminate anger. The goal is to use anger wisely. Human maturity is not becoming empty. It is becoming integrated. A mature person understands, "I have power, but power requires responsibility. I have desires, but desires require discipline. I have emotions, but emotions require wisdom." The highest form of strength is not becoming untouchable. It is becoming responsible. Because the strongest person is not the one who has no weaknesses. It is the person who knows their weaknesses and refuses to be controlled by them. Nietzsche's greatest challenge was not become powerful over others. It was become powerful over yourself. The person who controls others may become a ruler. The person who controls themselves becomes free. But after questioning morality, after confronting resentment, after searching for meaning, after learning self-mastery, one final question remains. What does a truly conscious human being become? Do we simply follow inherent values? Do we reject all values? Do we create ourselves completely? Or is there a higher path? A path where a person understands themselves, accepts responsibility, develops character, and consciously chooses how to live. Because the final journey beyond good and evil is not about becoming above humanity. It is about becoming fully human, and that is where our final chapter begins. Chapter 10, Beyond Good and Evil. Becoming conscious for thousands of years, human beings have searched for the answer to one question. Asterisk, what does it mean to live a good life? Every civilization has attempted to answer it. Religions have offered answers. Philosophers have offered answers. Cultures have created traditions. Families have passed down values from one generation to another. But after everything we have explored, we arrive at a deeper question. Is a good person simply someone who follows the rules? Or is goodness something deeper? Something that requires awareness? Something that requires responsibility? Something that requires the courage to understand yourself? Friedrich Nietzsche challenged humanity with an uncomfortable idea. He believed many people live according to values they never truly examined. They inherit beliefs, they follow expectations, they seek approval, they repeat ideas passed down by others. Then they call this a meaningful life. Nietzsche's challenge was not stop being moral. It was understand the foundations of your morality. Ask yourself, why do I believe what I believe? Why do I value what I value? Why do I consider certain actions good and others wrong? Are these beliefs truly mine, or were they simply given to me before I was old enough to question them? This is where the journey begins, not with rejecting everything, not with accepting everything, but with becoming conscious. A person who never questions themselves may spend their entire life defending an identity created by others. They may chase success because society told them success matters. They may seek approval because they fear rejection. They may follow traditions without understanding their purpose. They may fight enemies they never personally chose. The unconscious person is not truly free, because although they make choices, their choices are controlled by forces they do not understand. This is why self-knowledge is the foundation of wisdom. Carl Jung believed the greatest task of human development was becoming whole, not becoming perfect, not becoming someone without flaws, but becoming someone who understands all parts of themselves. The conscious person knows, I have strengths, I have weaknesses, I have noble desires, I have selfish impulses, I have courage, I have fear. They do not deny their humanity. They learn to govern it. This connects with one of Viktor Frankl's greatest insights. Frankl showed that humans are not defined only by their circumstances. They are also defined by their response. A person cannot always choose what happens. They cannot control every loss, every disappointment, every injustice, every difficulty. But they can choose what kind of person they become because of those experiences. This is the difference between suffering and meaning. Two people can experience the same hardship. One becomes bitter, another becomes wiser. The event is the same. The transformation is different. Meaning is created through responsibility. Person asks, what does life require from me? Not only, what do I want from life? This is where Nietzsche, Frankl, Aristotle, Jung, and the Stoics come together. Different thinkers, different centuries, different languages, but one common message. Human beings must take responsibility for who they become. Aristotle believed a good life was not created by occasional good actions. It was created by developing good character. A person becomes courageous by practicing courage. A person becomes disciplined by practicing discipline. A person becomes wise by practicing wisdom. Character is not something you claim. It is something you build. The Stoics understood that life will always contain things beyond our control. Loss, change, failure, other people's opinions, the passing of time, death. But they believed freedom comes from mastering the one thing that belongs to us, our response. Marcus Aurelius was one of the most powerful people who ever lived. Yet his greatest concern was not conquering enemies. It was conquering himself. Because a person who cannot control their own mind is still a prisoner. Daniel Kahneman adds another important lesson. Even when we believe we are thinking rationally, our minds are influenced by bias, emotion, memory, identity, experience. The conscious person understands, I can be wrong, I can misunderstand, I can be influenced. This humility is not weakness. It is protection against self-deception. The greatest obstacle to growth is often not ignorance. It is the belief that we already understand. A person who believes they know everything cannot learn. A person who believes they are always right cannot improve. A person who believes they are incapable of wrongdoing cannot correct themselves. This is why the journey beyond good and evil does not produce arrogance. It produces humility. The person who truly understands human nature becomes less judgmental because they understand complexity. They know that every human being contains contradictions. A good person is not someone who has no darkness. A good person is someone who has looked at their darkness and chosen not to be controlled by it. The courageous person is not someone who feels no fear. They are someone who acts despite fear. The disciplined person is not someone who has no desires. They are someone who chooses which desires deserve to be followed. The wise person is not someone who has all answers. They are someone who knows which questions matter. This is the difference between appearance and reality. Appearance asks, how do people see me? Reality asks, who am I when nobody is watching? The modern world constantly encourages performance. Build a brand, create an image, gain attention, collect approval. But a human being cannot build a meaningful life only from appearances. Eventually, the outside world becomes quiet. The applause disappears, the audience leaves, and the person must face themselves. The final question is always personal. Who are you without the mask? Who are you without your achievements? Who are you without the opinions of others? Who are you when there is nobody left to impress? Because the greatest achievement is not convincing the world that you are good. The greatest achievement is becoming someone who does not need to convince the world. A person who understands themselves does not need constant validation. They do not need to destroy others to feel valuable. They do not need to pretend they have no weaknesses. They do not need to hide from uncomfortable truths. They simply continue the lifelong process of becoming. This is what Nietzsche called self-overcoming, not becoming superior to others, becoming superior to your former self. The goal is not perfection. The goal is progress. To become more honest, more disciplined, more courageous, more responsible, more aware. The journey beyond good and evil is therefore not a journey away from morality. It is a journey toward a deeper morality, a morality that is no longer based only on appearance, a morality based on understanding. Because the greatest battle of human life is not between heroes and villains. It is inside every person, but between the person you are and the person you could become, between your fears and your responsibilities, between your unconscious desires and your conscious values, between the easy path and the meaningful path. The person who never examines themselves may spend their life controlled by invisible forces, but the person who develops self-awareness gains something rare: freedom. Not freedom to do anything, freedom to choose wisely, not freedom through responsibility, not freedom from morality, freedom from ignorance of oneself. In the end, the most important question is not, am I a good person? Because almost everyone wants to believe the answer is yes. The deeper question is, am I becoming the kind of person who deserves that answer? Because every human being carries the possibility of greatness, and every human being carries the possibility of destruction. The difference is not that some people have darkness and others do not. The difference is whether they have the courage to face it. The journey beyond good and evil begins when we stop asking only, who is right, and start asking, what kind of person am I becoming? Because the person who truly knows themselves is not perfect. They are awake, and perhaps that is the beginning of wisdom.